covered everything there before we get our discussion going. So I'm really excited about our conversation this morning. For those that have not been on in the past, just a quick FYI or reminder that we use the chat. So if you have questions that you'd like Amanda or myself to respond to, please put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, of course, and we'll get those questions weaved into our conversation. This is meant to be an engaging discussion, not just a monologue. So we really encourage and want you all to ask your questions about what's happening with your own teams and building disruptive teams and staying on point as well. So feel free to chime in with your questions as we go through this. All right, Amanda, with that, I will turn it over to you to do an introduction of kind of who you are and your role out at DoorDash.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I do sit in Austin. John Ford is my wonderful cousin. So a little bit of family connection there. So really excited to be with you guys. Yeah, so I work for DoorDash. I'd love to believe that everyone knows what DoorDash is, but just in case you don't, we are a third-party delivery company. So similar to Grubhub, Seamless, Postmates. We don't like any of those people, but that's those are our competitors. Yeah, so we do last mile logistics. We work with mostly restaurants. It's where our bread and butter started, but now we've expanded. If you have ever ordered delivery through Walmart, you've worked with DoorDash. If you order from CVS or Walgreens right now, you're ordering with DoorDash. So we're kind of branching off and figuring out, obviously during this pandemic, that convenience is even more important than it's ever been. I started with DoorDash about 3 years and some change ago. I started off as an outside seller in the Dallas market, was asked to move down to Austin, and I launched DoorDash in Austin for the company. Was a founding member of the team lead function in our pre-sale business. So figured out the job responsibilities there. Put together our pre-sale training that we used for about 1.5 years, built 90-page decks on how we were going to do this role and how it was going to function. And then I took over the regional sales manager role of April of 2019, took a team of 5, built it to a team of 15, 70% to OKR numbers, brought them to 123. I now actually transitioned into a new role. We just launched a new team here at DoorDash that's centered solely around renegotiations and account development. So back into more of an IC function for the moment. But I'm a builder at heart. I love building new teams. Clearly, I've done some building during my time here at DoorDash, and this was another great opportunity to kind of take my next step at DoorDash and move it into that renegotiation function and help build that team out as well. So been here for a while, have loved my leadership experience. It's been about 2.5 years of time at DoorDash, and it's been a really great experience so far.
That's great. And I have to ask you, are you required when you live in Austin to have a guitar on the wall, on at least one wall of your house? Is that a requirement?
No, it's one of these things. Yes, because it's Austin. I have a Pearl Jam poster over here also behind me. But yeah, no, I've played guitar since I was in the 6th grade. And once the pandemic hit, it was kind of like, well, I could do a virtual background, or I could just make my normal background look really cool. So we put the guitar up instead.
Yeah, we had our speaker, I think, last month that had kind of some musical paraphernalia also behind her as well. So I just had to ask that question. That's great.
Yes.
So Amanda, you and I were talking offline actually a couple of days ago about kind of your new role, right? And this whole focus on today is around disruption and running and building a disruptive team also, but also kind of disruption of our own careers right now also, because there's been so much change out there. And you had shared with me that you had taken, a step aside or a step back, if you want, in the very, very short term, with the goal of being in a leadership role in the midterm, in a few months' time. Can you talk about that, and just the DoorDash way or career track that they lay out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So kind of like I mentioned, been in leadership for about 2 years, and I've been mentored by an incredible individual who had really helped me as a manager. I will be the first to admit I hate confrontation, but you kind of have to get uncomfortable. You have to obviously be confrontational as a leader, and really kind of navigated me through my first year or two as a leader, and had told myself I would work for this individual at some point in my career. And she was the one that they asked to go and branch off and lead this renegotiation team. And so knowing that eventually she was more than likely going to need to develop a leadership bench herself. Obviously, renegotiations are sometimes a little bit more complex, especially in the DoorDash world. Our pre-sale team focuses on one product. It's bringing these merchants or these restaurants to life onto the platform. And then we kind of hand them off to our account management team, and we don't really do much else with them. And so for me, taking a step backwards in my sales career and in my leadership career was a little bit of a threefold thing for me. One, I was going to get to go work directly under a person who I was learning from, and not just learn from her based on her verbal, support through me, but how is she physically managing and leading a team? And then also, how is she building out this new group of individuals and teams? We launched a new software product recently. She's managing that sales team as well. And so it's been a great opportunity for me to learn. I think we should always strive to learn and grow in that aspect. Two, it was an opportunity for me to go build again and to develop my own individual skills. I've done renegotiations before, but nothing to the caliber. And I'm working with $1 million accounts now. And it was a really great opportunity for me to do that as well. But the cool thing about DoorDash is we really believe you do the role before you get it. I'm a very avid believer at any company. The best leaders are the ones that have been in the shoes before. So in talking with my VP of sales, with my current boss, with the director of my department as well, they wanted the next leader of this team to have done the role before. And so the conversation was very much hey, we love this idea of you potentially getting into this leadership role, but we want you to do it first. And so taking that step backwards to hopefully propel my career into more of a senior manager or director level later, absolutely. But definitely had the question asked during the interview process, what if you don't get it? Are you okay with that? Are you okay staying in a selling role? The answer is yes. I really believe that opportunity presents itself at DoorDash very frequently. And this was the right move for my career as well.
That's fantastic. That's great. And I mean, mentorship is such a huge thing as well. And being able to identify at any stage of your career, someone that you work for. And many times it doesn't begin as a formal mentorship where there's an assignment of an accountability buddy or a mentor, but it just kind of evolves, if you will, as you work with someone and you get a feel for how they operate and you aspire to work with them and also to be like them in terms of their approach, which is great. So it's great that you can identify that person and be able to then move into that role. That's wonderful.
Yes.
So one of my questions actually is a question also from Joseph as well. So, my son who's 18 off in college, he's a Dasher, right? So he loves DoorDash. It's fantastic. But now that he's at college, with the college campus itself, they use Grubhub, right? So it's kind of hard for him to use that since he likes dashing, obviously. But so can you talk about kind of the differentiation out there? I mean, for a while it was, this is what we do. It's kind of just pure education of customers. Now it's more, how do we differentiate, right? So maybe you can talk about that differentiation.
Differentiate from our competitors?
Exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. I get this question a lot during an interview where they're like, what makes you guys great? How did you, one thing that I'm really, really proud again, I kind of, people say you took a chance when you started at DoorDash when you did. I didn't know I was taking a chance. It was a really cool opportunity to work with people that in the interview process were incredible. I didn't think I knew what the risk was at the time being. And, when I came on board, we were third in market share. We're now number one. And I think what I've always been very, very proud of DoorDash for that reason is, we weren't Uber Eats. We didn't have this ride share business that all of a sudden we could flip a switch and get all of these customers and engage with them. We weren't Grubhub where we had this years and years of experience. And, Grubhub kind of started off as more of a marketing platform. We really organically and grassroots grew our business. And I think, we lead from the mentality that selection is key. So we believed that we had the best restaurants. We acquired the most enterprise businesses as quickly as possible, which again, expanded our reach into smaller markets. But if you ask me what sets us apart and the things that we do as a company, and I'll answer pre-pandemic and then I'll answer post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, it's quality. It's 100% the support that we've been giving. We actually have 3 different lines of services. Our support is not just this one umbrella. We have a line specifically for Dashers. We have a specific line for our restaurants. We have a specific line for our customers, so that one isn't waiting behind the other and vice versa. The other thing is we've always limited our delivery radiuses, which was something that none of the other platforms did. We don't go further than 12 minutes of a drive. Maybe we stretch a little bit more now because we've seen our competitors doing it, but we limited to a 5-mile delivery radius because we wanted the food to be as close to the restaurant quality as we could get it. Or, normally when you would go and pick up a to-go order from a fast food joint, you're going to your close neighborhood Whataburger or your close neighborhood Chick-fil-A, and you probably are getting it home in 10 to 12 minutes. And we wanted that to stay as similar as possible. So I think from the quality perspective, but we're a merchant first organization. So pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, we can't do anything if we don't have the restaurants first. If we don't have restaurants to have these deliveries like ordered from, we're not going to have the customers, we're not going to have the Dashers to go and pick it up. So post-pandemic, that's where really our focus went. We, us employees gave up. We had a lot of food and beverage benefits at the offices. Our lunch and dinner is paid for, even for remote employees. We gave those things up and we put that money back into restaurants. I think we had about 300 million, I believe, or 200 million in relief towards restaurants. We lowered some rates. We have really been supporting Black-owned businesses right now. We have a movement called Kitchens Without Borders, where we support immigrant-owned restaurants. And I think that's what set us apart, is that we've found where we can support communities. We've found where we can support the local. And we've done those things with Dashers as well. We actually came out with health benefits for Dashers recently. We supported them. We gave them extra pay. We've done different things like that during the pandemic as well. And so the thing that sets us apart, always our bread and butter to me, is quality, selection. But then I think at the core of who DoorDash is we've wanted to figure out how do we support the local economy first and drive the business to those local businesses, even more than our enterprise partners as well.
Interesting. Wow. Well, thanks for walking us through that as well. I mean, I know, like I said, I know my son as an example. The app is so easy to use. Everything gets done very efficiently, very effectively. He knows where he's going. He knows where the hot spots are. It's amazing how accurate, if you will, that app is at guiding people. So that's great. So question for you, and it's kind of like my business on the recruiting side, where we're two-sided, right? I'm no good to my clients without great candidates, but I'm also no good to my candidates without great clients. And you're kind of similar, right? You need to have the restaurants, but also the drivers. So I guess the question is, how do you balance that? But also, is there a specific target profile of the kind of restaurant that you want to be a DoorDash customer?
No, they need to be nice people. Obviously, we want to work with nice people. No, honestly, at the end of the day, it's really interesting how we've broken down our sales team. On the pre-sale side of our business, we've got your enterprise business. We about a year ago launched a mid-market segment because we realized that they weren't really being serviced. My team, which was more of your local SMB, and then we have an inside team it's probably working every business that my team's not. So my team was working probably the top 20% of the local businesses. And then our inside team is working that 20% down. We've got self sign-ons, we've got all that. So yes, at the end of the day, we want good partners. We want people that aren't going to be vulgar to our Dashers or to our customers and things like that. But everyone should be on the platform. I think Tony, our CEO's mindset is everybody and everyone needs to have this service because it's an added benefit to their restaurant. And so from that perspective, the profile to us is more so, can you just be a good human?
That's great. I like that. That should be all of our mottos, right? All of our target customer profile.
Yeah.
The no asshole rule, right?
Exactly. 100%.
So actually a question came up, and this is a really good topic also. How has there been a shift in how you go about your renegotiations now being in the middle of COVID? Right? Has that changed the leverage at all that you may have or may not have?
100% has.
Yeah.
It's been hit and miss, right? So, when the pandemic first hit, we'll say March 16th, because I feel like that's the day that everything really kind of happened.
Right. When they shut down the NBA, and also when Tom Hanks got it, that was it.
Yes,
we're all done.
Tom Hanks shut down the world.
Exactly.
No, definitely. I think, that day I probably for the next month was working about 16 to 18 hour work days, because the influx of merchants that we had coming in to us was unlike anything we'd seen before. My team signed 800% of a monthly goal in 1 week. It was insanity to see what was happening. And I think the thing that's always been really cool about DoorDash is we take we're not an emotional company in that sense, but we really are believe in the mission that we're going after. I think that's one thing that has propelled DoorDash to the successes. Whether you're in sales, marketing, legal, accounting, auditing, whatever department you want to say you work for at DoorDash, we really have this unified goal of being the Amazon of local businesses. And so we felt this sense of ownership in making sure that we help these restaurants stay alive, basically. And so at that time, it was going as fast as we could. Now that it's kind of trickled off and we've seen these restaurants, yes, legislation is putting commission caps. So we run on a commission-based system. So I might go to a restaurant and say, hey, we're going to take 25% of the sale. We're going to give you 75%. We see this as an incremental order. Every Uber, Grubhub, Postmates, we all operate under the same business math mentality. So 25% we'll say is what we're going to take. But if you look in Los Angeles right now, there's a commission cap of 15% in the city of Los Angeles. If you look in Fresno, they just rolled out a 20% commission cap. So we've lowered those things. We used to sell above 30%. We no longer sell above 30%. The other thing that we're doing is we're kind of reevaluating what it looks like for a profitable order right now. And so, for instance, percentages, we all know how those work. Previously, if a restaurant had a average ticket size, let's say of $40, we still might try and sell them at 25%. But now we might go in and say, hey, you know what? We still make the same amount of money on this order at 15%. 15% it is. As long as we're staying in the green, I think that's where we're trying to stay right now. So yes, I haven't really renegotiated a deal in my new role. Actually, I sell new products as well and get them to buy into new products. But from a renegotiation standpoint, unless DoorDash has actually been losing significant dollars on those orders, we're not renegotiating deals right now. We're only trying to increase sales for these restaurants right now.
Interesting. So I would think, it's so fascinating to think about how analytics, kind of plays into what you just talked about, understanding what is a profitable order, that 5-mile radius, is there a certain radius that you can expand it to and it's still profitable? Can you give us a sense for how you gather that data and how the analytics does, impact those decisions?
Yeah, I wish I could really. I'm not like the
no, you're not a data scientist. I get that, but
not,
but luckily for you, nobody on the call today probably is. So
that's great. A lot of it's our algorithm. I think, kind of to your point, right? We're a 3-sided model. We have our customers, we have our drivers, we have our restaurants, and we pay our drivers based on difficulty of the orders. And so if a driver is going to end up needing to drive more than 5 miles, we're probably going to have to pay them more. It pulls them away from other restaurants. I just moved into a new house and I'm about 10 minutes just from the highway, just to get to my house. And so we know that the driver is probably going to have to drive a little bit further, and that changes the time of everything. And, we try and keep the minute that a customer presses the go button on the order to the time they get it at their house, we try and keep that under 45 minutes as often as we can. And so all of those things, I think, play into the dollar amount and the profitability of, customer, refunds. We actually have account managers that really focus on operational excellence and do trainings with staff to say, hey, this is how you need to read through and check your orders, because our drivers don't do food handling. And so, or not our drivers, I'm sorry, Dashers don't do food handling. And so that's kind of the thing there is every time a Dasher leaves without maybe checking that, hey, the fries were actually there, the restaurant doesn't check, hey, the fries are there, DoorDash is usually paying the customer back for that. And we take a lot of that responsibility on ourselves. So there's a very big, long algorithm of how our business model works. But I think there's those small nuances that we can kind of train and teach and educate and coach into our partners and into the Dashers and into, even our customers to that point, put better notes. It's okay to put more notes or different things like that. So it all plays into the cycle of DoorDash.
Exactly right. So actually a great question came up also about competition, right? You talked about, the ones that people know about, the Uber Eats and the Grubhubs and those. But is there, being that you were disruptive yourselves, right? Because you didn't start, years ago, as you talked about with Grubhub and some of those, that you are really a technology platform play that has been disruptive. Is there a concern about your kind of competitors, if you will, changing, or now it's going to be individual folks that are driving or for you now, but they say, you know what, I can do this on my own and I can charge a restaurant 12% or 10%. Is there a concern about the competitive landscape changing with kind of the DIYers, if you will?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and these are my own ideas. I don't I'm not speaking for DoorDash here.
Curious, yeah.
But when we first started, there were a lot more local businesses. Favor, a company here in Austin, was massive. They owned the market share. I was asked to come to Austin specifically to beat Favor. And right when I started, Favor had just pulled out of other states and was solely focused on Texas. And we've got competitors all over. Mr. Delivery is a small one, and there's every pocket has these smaller ones. And Grubhub has chosen to buy them out. Some of it was, a lot of it came down to, we started accumulating drivers because drivers were getting paid more on our platforms because we had a larger footprint. So I think we moved from a DIY model to actually now to where we're at. I think the disruption in that aspect of these maybe smaller competitors, more local competitors, have kind of started realizing, okay, we're going to work with our brands, but DoorDash and Grubhubs and Ubers, we've kind of got this back footprint with the support that we're able to offer, the quality, the number of drivers that we actually have in our fleets now. It's kind of where this DIY model has already been disruptive. So I don't know that it would happen, or that we're so much worried about that. We are hyper focused, not, we're customer focused, not competitor focused, but we'd be lying if we said that we don't try and figure out what Uber is up to, or, we've seen that Uber's offering some places 5 to 10% deals right now, and we don't want to go there, but if we're going to need to, we're going to need to, I think, in
Sure.
some. So I think we're really trying to, I think the race that is the third-party delivery scene right now, it's still, Grubhub and us trying, and Uber trying to figure out how we still become that top dog and maintain that. So.
Great. And just a quick question someone had also, do you ever kind of encourage people to use certain restaurants, or highlight certain restaurants, or promote them, that kind of thing? Or is it all kind of even across the board?
There's different, our algorithm on our site actually does a few things. One, the number one thing there is the actual service, is not the service fee, the delivery fee that the customer is paying. So the lower the fee, the higher up on the platform they get. Next thing is the amount of volume that they've done. So the more that they're getting orders, the higher up they get, because more than likely that's what customers want to see. And we don't want to bury that so that customers are taking forever to go. That's not to say that we don't have marketing channels, or we have, different carousels that show like local favorites. We don't charge free to be in a local favorite carousel. So sometimes as a seller, I might say, hey, like, I'm going to leverage this to bring you guys on for your first 30 days. Let's put you here so that we're spiking that volume right off the bat and getting you to that higher real estate. So right now there's an algorithm that has to do around our rating system. We rate drivers and restaurants separately, actually. So your son, if he was doing a great job, but the food was terrible, would never have a bad rating, because that's a whole separate rating system. So there's like 5 different factors that play into where they actually fall in our real estate.
Okay, great. Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
So let's switch gears from kind of the broader business landscape and focus more on kind of the team disruption, if you will. So the first question, the obvious one is, are you working remote? Is your whole team working remote? And if so, how has that changed the selling process?
My team has, so when I was a manager pre-pandemic, most of my team was remote. We have a regional hub here in Austin. Every region has a hub, if you will. So Austin's our hub down here for the greater Texas market. So I had about 6 of my team members here in market, and the rest of them were out in the field. So we ran a pretty remote setup from the pre-sale aspect of it, or the outside pre-sale aspect of it, for quite a while. So that transition wasn't necessarily too hard. What it eliminated was me going out into the field and doing those face-to-face interactions with my team, or bringing them into Austin and having, a 2 to 3 day offsite of training and fun. So we haven't gotten to do that. We created these virtual offsites. Airbnb has done some great things of experiences now. So we've done, a Mexican cooking class with a woman from Mexico City and different things like that. So you still keep that engagement. But no, our entire company is still currently remote. We plan to go back. We haven't let go of any of our offices. We really believe as a company that collaboration happens best face-to-face. You pick up on different tidbits. In our Austin office, I've got the VP of strategy and operations. The VP of our support department is in Austin. And so you hear those conversations going on, and you learn more about the company, and you learn how to position that as a seller as well. And so we're definitely looking forward to getting back into offices as soon as we can.
Yeah, sure, exactly. I think a lot of us are, at least a couple of days a week. Yeah.
I know.
Exactly. You talked earlier about how you have different teams for different sales or different types of restaurants or what have you. Also, someone asked a question really going about the whole kind of dark kitchen, ghost kitchen world. Is there a team focusing on that effort also? And what's happening there?
Great question. Yeah, so there's a few different things that we look at. We've got virtual kitchens, which basically is Chick-fil-A has a location and they want to start a new concept, but they want to run it out of their current Chick-fil-A kitchen. We consider that virtual. There are a couple of people that we just hired to really start leaning into that. Not sure if you all are familiar with third-party delivery world. The Chili's restaurant brand just launched It's Just Wings. It's now a $150 million business in the span of 30 days. And that was all virtual, and they're doing it out of their current Chili's and Maggiano's locations. So there is a team that's starting to focus on that from an enterprise level right now, but on a local level, we do from time to time have those conversations and encourage those because it's extra revenue streaming. From the ghost kitchen perspective, there are companies out there, Cloud Kitchens, Kitchens United, that are actually buying up warehouse space and creating these. We've launched our first one in Redwood City up in San Francisco in the Bay Area. So we're rolling those out. There is a small team that is starting that endeavor, but we're still in the early development stages of that for DoorDash.
Great, great. So how have you, as you built teams, and you said you've been selling now, but you also sold a few years ago when you first started as well. How has your selling approach changed? And then how has your, kind of, even though you're not technically managing a team right now, but how are you, kind of guiding or mentoring other sales folks just coming on board? What are kind of the hot buttons for an effective salesperson these days?
Yeah, I think you always, it's interesting because I was talking to actually a new hire right before this call, and I didn't work in the restaurant industry before. I actually was in the sports industry and selling sports training equipment to NFL teams. And then before that, I was in the oil and gas industry working down in Houston. So I've kind of had a different buyer profile. And I think if you ask me, how do I coach a rep? It's who is your buyer? I think that's obviously the starting point for everything. And as I have sold in these different industries and understood how I need to sell, but then also transitioned into this managerial role. I had a manager here at DoorDash for 3 months. One of my managers was out on maternity leave. And the first thing he said to me was, you have to humanize everything. And I've kind of just leaned into that as a seller, but I've also leaned into that as a manager as well. You look at restaurant owners, and more than likely, especially on the local SMB level, there's a reason why they do what they do. They either inherited the restaurant from their father or their mother. It was their lifelong dream, and they've put everything that they had into it. And so again, I'm looking at my buyer, and all they want to do is be able to tell you their story, share their food with you. And so I think one thing I was doing a lot as a seller at the beginning of my time here at DoorDash, I was terrible at my follow-up. My follow-up game had to change tremendously because they were quick, but they're busy. Restaurant owners constantly are going, and you've got to catch them when you catch them. So you basically have to propose to them within 20 minutes and ask them to marry you in the first 20 minutes of being like in front of them. And hopefully they say yes. But I think that's kind of, when you humanize everything from that perspective as a seller, you're connecting with your buyer in the way that they need to be connected with. Same thing as I'm leading a team, I'm humanizing my reps. They're not my reps. They're people. They're my team. They've got personal lives. They've got things that are going on. My team, when I took over from the team lead function, where I was more of that player coach, to this managerial, 5 of my teammates stepped up and said, we're ready to win for you, not for DoorDash, but for you. And I took so much pride in that, because at that moment they knew she cares about my paycheck. She wants me to succeed. She wants my career to grow, but she also knows that if I have to run because my kid scraped their knee and is going to the ER, I don't have to fret telling my boss that. And so I think when you humanize and open up that vulnerability channel, that's probably been the biggest thing in the last 2 to 3 years that has changed my sales approach, is humanize the person on the other side of the table.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I think that's great from a customer perspective as well, and our own teams. I think so often we just look at our customers as just a number that's going to drive us towards our quota or our revenue goals, whatever it is, as opposed to, what is that customer dealing with? What about them as far as COVID goes? Any sicknesses? Are they trying to teach their kids at home while you're trying to sell them on a new product and service? So that humanizing approach goes a very, very long way. I'm curious about, so as DoorDash has matured a little bit over the last number of years, has that changed the kind of person that you think is the right fit for the organization? Somebody that was a fit for a pure startup, a kind of real, very fluid, very unknown kind of thing, may not be the right fit for a more mature business that's now getting a little bit more corporate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has that changed in terms of that profile?
It's interesting you say that. So one of my very first sellers, she actually started 4 months before me. She's actually in my living room right now, just hanging out. We were joking yesterday that maybe if we tried to interview for DoorDash today, we wouldn't have actually gotten the jobs. We actually, two of our sales managers now are actually had never sold before they came to DoorDash. They were lawyers before they got here. I think when I first started, it wasn't that we were taking anyone in every, I think I talked to you about this the other day on the phone, but I watched a video recently from Simon Sinek. It was a graph, and on one side of the graph, it talked about performance. On the bottom side of the graph, it talked about trust. And that was trust from a perspective of, I trust you with my kids, trust you with my family, I trust you with my car keys, anything like that. And then performance obviously being on the business level and job and company related. And they obviously, everyone wants the high performer, high trust individual. If we look at a tic-tac-toe board, we want that person up at the top of that graph. But I think what we can really expect and to run a smooth and strong business is at least that medium performer, but high trust. And I really loved that message. And I think if you look at DoorDash early days, we had to be a little bit flexible on the experience that was coming in from, at least on the sales side of things. Yes, we hired a lawyer. Yes, we hired a lot of inside sellers to be outside sellers that hadn't been outside sellers before. We hired people from backgrounds that had never, like I said, I worked at a coffee shop for maybe a year and a half in college, and that's the extent of my restaurant knowledge and industry knowledge. And so I couldn't talk the talk and walk the walk. But if you look now, yes, we're probably a little bit more choosy in the sense of, has this person been in the market that they're wanting to sell into for a while? Do they know the big restaurant names? Do they have that outside selling experience? But I think what we haven't lost is that culture fit. We have a really extensive interviewing process here. Everyone I talk to says it's the longest that they've ever been through. We put you through 4 rounds, and we put you through about 6 or 7 different interviewing panels. We do that because we really need the right culture fit. We'll coach anybody. I had an individual who didn't hit goal the first 9 months he was at our company, but his work ethic was there. He was a culture carrier. He was somebody that I knew was willing. And so I continued to invest. He ended up being my team lead and is being groomed for a managerial role right now. And he was on 2 performance plans, but we worked through it. And I think those are the people that you want. And those are the people that really do push the organization along. And so I don't think we've compromised there. I think, yes, we have the ability, because we're a better known brand now. People want to work for DoorDash, whereas before they were reaching out to you and begging you to kind of come on a little bit. But I don't think we've sacrificed on that culture piece.
Yeah, that's great. Very good. Very good. Well, and in terms of that piece there around kind of the diversity of thought in terms of who you're hiring, how you're hiring people, and what they're looking for. Also, we talked offline a little bit about that whole diversity piece and whether or not that was a big part of the hiring process out there. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the diversity and inclusion reputation, if you will, or focus that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I was talking to you the other day, I think DoorDash has always wanted to change the status quo of tech and not lean into the stereotypical white men who run a lot of the companies. And I'm going to, that's just where we're at. I think the cool thing that DoorDash did, and we launched it in our outside sales team about a year ago, was we implemented the Rooney Rule. So for those that don't know, the Rooney Rule started in the NFL to allow coaches of color the ability to interview, and they had to put someone of color through the final round of interview before they were going to hire a white man as the coach of said NFL team. DoorDash actually implemented that a year ago in the outside sales org to try and run with it and test it out in this organization. And so I was not allowed to hire a white man until I had a female and a person of color through the final round of interview, giving them that full true opportunity. And I think there's a statistic that shows that our recruiting team showed us that once you have at least interviewed a female or person of color, or 2 people that are of a underrepresented class, the bias just naturally kind of flips away from your bias, your unconscious biases. And so DoorDash launched the Rooney Rule back a year ago, like I mentioned, really implementing it about 6 months ago. We just rolled it out to our post-sale team. And it's caused our teams to look a lot more diverse. Diversity and inclusion is a really, really big thing for me. It was something I really heavily focused on as a manager. My team was about 50% white men and then 50% female or people of color. And the big reason I was talking to Ken about this the other day is If you ask me what my strategy is when it comes to hiring and what my idea was around making a disruptive team and a diverse team, is you have to have the right staff in the right place. I mentioned, I live in Texas. I ran the Texas region. We launched Texas in 2014, and we didn't have a bilingual Spanish speaker in the market until May of 2019. That's 5 years without someone that speaks Spanish in a predominantly Spanish speaking state. And that was something that became really important to me, was, do I have the right staff in the right place? And the right staff is diversity. The right staff is females. The right staff is Black men. The right staff is Hispanics in the Valley, or the Hispanics in Dallas. And so it was one of those things where really leaning into diversity became a very, very important part of my managerial process, we'll call it.
Sorry, I got kicked off there. I'm back now. Do you have customers or potential hires that mention that you have a good reputation for that diversity, of the organization?
Firsthand, I haven't probably heard anything firsthand. One thing that we do as well, though, is in the initial email that we send out when we've said, hey, yes, we're going to schedule you for your first round of interviews, is we actually have an inclusivity statement that is listed in that email. And the hiring manager is responsible during the interview process to bring that up and say, hey, did you see our inclusivity statement? What do you think of that? And we look to have that open dialogue. We look early on. And so what I have heard the feedback is, thank you for having something like that. When I did read it, it made me even more confident that this was a place I wanted to be. Or, no, I'm sorry, I guess I didn't see that, but please talk to me more about it. And we're not going to slap you on the wrist if you didn't read it or you don't know how to engage on it. But we want you to know that that's something that we take seriously, that it's something that we're striving for within our organization.
Very good. Wonderful. And now you talked earlier about how your background, you didn't really have a lot of background specifically in restaurants per se before coming on board. Is that a criteria that has proven to be important? Or maybe a better question is, what criteria in your hires and your sales folks tends to be consistently, a correlation with their performance?
Yeah, I'm a sales manager and I kind of run the opposite direction than some of my peers, but no, if you don't have restaurant experience, I actually find that you probably do a little bit better because you're forced to learn. Again, it's easier to build habits than break habits. And so obviously that's where I kind of see as a more important factor. We always look for shorter cycles. Our sales cycle on the pre-sale side here at DoorDash is anywhere from a 1-call close to about 2 weeks, unless we're doing some kind of a pilot or a rollout, or it's a really, really large, important merchant. Those tend to take a little bit longer. So shorter cycle tended to be something we looked for. People who were making maybe 40 dials a week weren't necessarily the right fit, because more than likely they had those longer cycles. So we were looking for people above like 100 calls a week. Startup space is always great. It usually, because there's a lot more ambiguity in the startup space, you tend to have to pivot a lot. I use the word pivot probably more than I should at my company, but I say it a lot. If you can't pivot, you're probably not going to make it here at DoorDash, because things can change 3 times a week. Go after this goal, but oh no, sorry, you got to add this layer to it and blah. So someone who that could really handle that ambiguity and that ability to quickly make those changes and not be flustered by it. So I asked a lot of questions during my interview process to try and lean into that. Tell me about a time you had to work with a sense of urgency. And usually I was looking for them to tell me a story. The best answer I ever got is actually our top performer right now here at DoorDash. She said, I work for a startup. I was told this new product had been released. I went and I pitched it to my #1 account, came back, told my boss that I closed it. And he said, why did you do that? It's only 10% complete. Ended up going to her design team to get the specs, took it to an engineering developer, then took it to another design member, had them do a mock-up. She still sold it on a demo product that wasn't going to be released until 6 months later, but she was independent and she was able to go out and get those things done. And so that kind of was my baseline standard. I hired her my first month as a manager. And I think that's what I probably looked for more, is could you be independent? Did you have a sense of ownership? And could you handle ambiguity?
That's a great response. Wow, that should be a kind of a template for a lot of people to use that kind of example. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What about in terms of, it's actually a great question that kind of dovetails with the question I have too. What about in terms of keeping people motivated, engaged when they're remote now? And along with that is my question about quotas as well. You talked about, getting, I forgot what the number was, 100 and something percent in just the first week of that month. Have you had to adjust quotas, and is that part of that engagement and continued motivation?
We really haven't had to adjust quotas. I think there was that quick spike, and if I'm honest, it saved my Q1 this year to have that quick spike in March. But after that, it really was a quick 2 week of this, and then it started doing this, and then plateauing back to our normal. So I'd say we've stayed that thankfully. I don't think a lot of businesses have had this luxury, but we've actually been able to stay pretty consistent. So we haven't really changed quotas too heavily. We did increase Q2 by about a 10% production in the months of April and May, but it assumed that June, which is actually one of our slower months as a company, would kind of taper off. So not a lot of quota adjustment. As far as your question regarding engagement in a remote setting, yes, it's definitely been a little bit harder. We use Slack. The little green lights that pop up on Slack that show that you're online is something I would check daily as a manager, and would leave that kind of up, and you kind of have to check in, but you had to do it from a place, I had 4 parents on my team who now had kids at home who were trying, and we had to be flexible. We had a couple of one of the cool things we did as a company for our sellers, if it was really hard for them with kids at home, we had them join what we called a task force. So they ended up just kind of playing a support role in getting accounts live, because they could do that at 8 o'clock at night, when the end of the day, when their kids had already gone to bed. And so for about 1 to 2 reps in every region, we put them on a task force and paid them a seller's salary to basically not be selling. So there were some adjustments that we did to really keep our employees that needed that support supported. We started a parent group, and we've done talent shows for kids. Us managers or sellers have gotten on and played guitar, or did a puppet show, or read a book. So from that engagement, we needed to take care of our employees in that sense. I think the other piece is we did more check-ins. I had a once a week happy hour, and every morning we did a book club. We did a coffee chat once a week. So it ended up being more virtual touch points than probably what we did in an office setting. But I think it also brought our team a lot closer together.
That's great. I love the idea about the talent show. That's fantastic. I know I've had a lot of companies ask me for ideas and things I've seen out there to get people engaged and keep them together and connected as well. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and to that point, what about, has there been any change in terms of the way that your team is selling, or that now that you're in an IC role that you're selling, is it, since you can't be out in the field, obviously visiting places, is it more emailing? Do restaurants respond to text messages? Is it phone calls? What does that engagement look like today?
Yeah, our pre-sale team, it's a lot of phone calling. Our outside reps are now basically inside sellers. It's been a little bit more difficult. I would say we've had to roll out some different softwares, a lot more of, we're now recording calls, and the beauty of that, we're recording calls and being able to coach directly to that, which has been incredible. On the flip side though, we've always done better in person. That's why our outside sales team exists. We have about an 80% close rate when we're in person, and that's really high. So there have been some reps, we have opened it up where we're not forcing you. We don't ask you to go out in person. If you'd like to go out in person into a meeting, we don't allow drop-ins any longer. But if you want to go out to a meeting, we need you to have gotten like a health form checked off. You need to tell us where you're going. We need the information. So they have to get permission. And it's usually only 1 to 2 meetings that we'd let them go out in person a week. But yeah, they've really had to jump more onto the phone game. For myself, on more of the post-sale aspect, we would do a lot of in-person, quarterly business reviews, weekly, monthly business reviews. We're doing a lot of that virtually through Zoom now. They're more engaged merchants because they already work with us. So it's easy to get them to commit to jumping on a Zoom and doing a face-to-face, so that we still get the body language aspect of it. But for pre-sale, it's been a very big change in basically going over the phone, and we're not really running meetings anymore. We're pitching as soon as we get the person. So we're having to speed up that cycle as well. Great.
So I'm curious about whether you've got companies like Postmates, right? And you've got obviously the Uber Eats that are doing several things. Do you think going forward that yourselves and competitors are going to have to diversify and start offering delivery beyond just the food items, but also other items as well to stay competitive and to maintain that, that market share?
Yes, more than likely. And I don't think it's necessarily to stay competitive amongst one another, but as much as it is to stay relevant amongst our customers.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, our CEO, said this. He got on an all hands. He said, we're in 2020, but after the pandemic, we're living in a world where customers expect 2023 technology.
Right.
And so that's where I'd say, we had already started our grocery division about 2 years ago. And that was a big jump. We launched our 7-Eleven partnership and doing convenient stuff like that about a year ago as well. We just announced our partnership with PetSmart. So now you're going to get your pet supplies delivered under an hour. We've piloted with Target. We've piloted in some places with pharmaceuticals. We just launched alcohol delivery in some states. And there's a lot that we're having to shift more because our consumer base needs it. People aren't leaving their houses, but they still need the things that they need. And so I think that's where more of the innovation is coming from, is what can be delivered. I think, Tony's mindset is we're going to literally be the one-stop shop. We're going to start doing courier services if he had his way. And, legal documents, we could start doing clothing stores from boutiques, or, who says we can't work with Allbirds and deliver from their brick and mortar? Nobody. We can if we get the partnership signed up. And so I think that's where you're going to start seeing some of that innovation. And it's the ghost kitchens. It's, different things like that where we're going to really have to start getting creative.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and we talked about obviously staying engaged and keeping your team engaged internally for sure, but that also stands to reason where you have to find ways to keep that engagement with customers, right? Because just as soon as you sign somebody up, they're probably getting a call from Grubhub or Uber Eats the very next day and trying to convert them over to their platform instead, right? So are there initiatives that, it's so hyper competitive. So are there initiatives in place that keep that engagement with customers going also?
Customers as in like you and I customers?
Yeah, so it's like restaurants. Sorry, I should say restaurants.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we during the pandemic, definitely, with restaurants that we launched a pickup product about 2 years ago. We offered 0% for pickup orders for about a 3-month period. For restaurants that had been on for a while, we offered them I think some certain amount of dollar, I don't know the actual dollar amount, but in free marketing to really start engaging and acquiring new customers during the pandemic as well. So there have been things that we do that. I think it's also the innovation. We have a back end system and we continue to get better reporting. We continue to allow them to chat with our support versus having to call in. So there's different things that we're doing there for the engagement purpose of it. But kind of speaking to the piece you mentioned about, every company does it. The minute we see somebody on Uber Eats, we're calling them and we're saying, hey, come get on DoorDash too, because now they've understood the value of it. We have exclusivity contracts here at DoorDash. We don't require it to be for a specific amount of time. Everything that we do is not contractually binding. So we basically, you need to give us a week's notice for us to give you that last direct deposit into your bank account, but we'll turn you off the minute you're ready to be turned off. We've never worked under a contract term kind of a business. At the same time, what's kind of nice about the third-party delivery industry is there's really only a 20% customer overlap between us and Uber Eats. So there's an 80% customer segment that if you're not on with us and Uber Eats, you're missing. And so truth be told, if I'm doing right by the restaurants, if I'm doing right to make them as much money, especially during a pandemic when they need it, you need to be on every single platform because everybody is loyal. We always use the example of GPS systems. Do you use Apple Maps? Do you use Google Maps? Do you use Waze? You probably go to one because you're more comfortable and familiar with it. And if the other one doesn't have it, oh, well, I'll just order something else is basically the mentality that we're seeing. So at the end of the day, if we're doing right by our restaurants and our merchant partners, then it's encouraging them to be on every platform versus going directly with us.
Interesting. And have you seen any change in terms of the stickiness of your customers? So if it's that 80% that is more, even unofficially, but they are kind of exclusive, is the stickiness, has it stayed pretty strong?
Yeah, I'd say we've seen an increase in ordering. We've seen an increase in wanting engagement. We've seen an increase in a lot of that. We're an industry that thankfully the pandemic needed. And so the sales increase in growth that we did see and that restaurants saw as well was very substantial, and it stayed that way. It's not like it went up just during the first few months of the pandemic, but we've kind of are staying at this level here. And now it's my new role to figure out how do we continue to increase from there. So yeah, I think we've seen an increase in orders from our actual consumers, but then we've also seen restaurants being significantly more engaged with us.
That's great. Yeah, two questions that came up. One person asked whether or not DoorDash is thinking about getting into the cannabis delivery business. And then also, what about food trucks? Do you guys actually deliver from food trucks?
We do deliver from food trucks as long as they are at least in a specific place for 3 days or more. So if they switch every day and go to a different office park or something like that, we can't, just because that would require them to have 7 different tablets for 7 days of the week, and it's kind of a nightmare. But we do food trucks. Cannabis, you're someone that we've been asking that question for like the last 3 years. Legally, it's a bit of a headache. What I think we love to probably eventually, again, this is my own opinion, yes, I would love DoorDash to deliver it, but
yeah, sure.
It would be a great model. And especially in states where it's legal, absolutely. Are we there yet? No. There's a lot of legal back end, I'm sure, that is required there.
Yeah, that'd be, I'm sure. Yeah.
Making the move with alcohol was a really, really big jump for us to begin with, because it's required quite a bit of, obviously, 21 and over. Dashers have to check IDs. There's a lot that, and just Texas alcohol legislation itself is very complicated. And so it's been a big lift on our legal team to get that done.
I can imagine. Yeah. Just being able to deliver that and be able to verify that the person delivering it is the right age and that the person receiving it is the right age. That's a lot of responsibility for the Dashers. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, interesting. So you made the comment before that was great. Once we come out of the pandemic in whatever form or fashion that happens to be in, customers will be expecting, technology of 2023 or 2025. Everything has been accelerated so much, trends that were already in place, but we expected them to come into place more effectively in 3, 5, 10 years have now all happened in a course of 6 months, right? So how will you, or what do you see coming down the pike in terms of that next round of technology that will really, kind of keep you at the forefront? Yeah,
I think, autonomous vehicles, AI is a big push. There, is a huge need to try, we can't get enough drivers in some cities right now. We'd love to say that we're definitely always fully staffed with the Dashers that we're needing, but we're not. It's also, as our model continues to develop and hopefully more jobs are created and as more gig economy things happen, we're going to fight over drivers as well. And so, can we do robots? Maybe, I don't know. Again, my own ideas here. Can we do drones where we're picking up here and literally flying to it and avoiding traffic so that we can go further because we're not going to get stuck in traffic and stoplights and all that kind of stuff? Maybe. I think that's a big piece of it, but I think it's also continuing to see what is needed on a convenience level for consumers. Is it, we need to work with Babies R Us or something like that because a parent needs diapers. I think that's always the next thing that we have to always be looking at is also what do our consumers need? Obviously, I think, a long tail story a long time ago, all of us employees are required to dash once a month, obviously not during COVID right now, but we're required to do a delivery every month. Tony does it. It keeps us rooted. It keeps us grounded. All of our earnings from those and all of the tips we get, we actually donate that to Feeding America. So really cool thing that we've done. But one of my regional general managers one time was in the middle of a blizzard in Denver, had to pick up a Subway sandwich. And she was like, a Subway sandwich in the middle of a blizzard? Who orders a Subway sandwich in the middle of a blizzard? Come to find out, she's delivering it to a hospital for a pregnant woman who is going into labor, and the husband was stuck because in the blizzard, couldn't get to the food, couldn't get to the hospital. And that was just a feel good story that I think has resonated forever with a lot of us, where it's just we need to keep doing because there is a need for what we're doing. There is going to be someone who can't get to where, I was just in the hospital with my dad for a 2-week period and I was eating hospital food for 2 weeks. I couldn't leave the floor he was on. I ordered DoorDash and I needed DoorDash. I needed a salad that wasn't full of salt. I love hospitals. But I think that's kind of where we see it is the innovation that we have to keep doing is what do restaurants need from us to make more money as a business? We launched our catering business because we found out a restaurant owner was turning down thousands of dollars of catering orders because they didn't have anyone to deliver it. And so I think that will continue to be the thing is we get our feedback directly from our consumers and from our merchants and from our drivers. And what do you need to make this better? What do you need to make more money? You know, and we'll continue to get that feedback, I think, from other industries now that aren't just restaurants. It could be, hey, I own a boutique and I really could, you know, use someone to deliver these tops because it's a Saturday night and people want to go. I mean, I don't know. I'm literally spitballing here, but I think that will continue to always be the thing is our innovation will come from the needs of making our customers more money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, someone in the chat brought up the idea of, you know, delivering to comedy festivals or music festivals, which there certainly is probably demand, but how would you find the person? You'd have to have a designated spot in that area that is for food delivery so everybody knows where to go. But yeah, it's probably a balancing act of demand versus logistics to make sure it's really feasible.
Well, and it's interesting. I think it's it's the LA Dodgers. The LA Dodgers are working with Postmates and actually doing go home, John. Anyways, but no, the Dodgers are actually doing Postmates delivery in their stadium right now. We found that really, really interesting. We just launched a partnership, obviously, with the NBA. We're now the official partner of the NBA, and we were delivering to the players in the bubble. We just launched actually with the Houston Astros and the Houston Texans at-home ballpark packages. So you spend $100 for a family of 4 and you're getting hot dogs, nachos, Cracker Jacks, things like that. And again, ways to be innovative. You know, the baseball stadiums are losing money right now and football stadiums are losing money right now. And it's going to just, a lot of these things kind of come to us. It's not so much that we're thinking about them. It's that they're coming to us because people are like, I think you could do this. Can you do this? And we figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's back to your point earlier about, you know, hiring the right kind of team members. They have to be able to pivot and understand that things are more fluid now than they've ever been. And that's probably not going to be going away. So whether it's customer innovation or delivery innovations or product innovation, that ability to adapt, right, and be in a fluid environment has to be there as well, for sure.
Right.
So we have just a couple minutes left. Any parting words that you want to share with us in terms of things that have worked for you in terms of building and or running a disruptive, an effective disruptive team?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have mentioned kind of my bread and butter moments. It really is that humanizing, it's vulnerability. You know, I think we kind of have a motto here at DoorDash where it's DoorDash team self in those specific orders. And as a leader, that was really important because you will always wear the hat in the face of DoorDash to your employees. Doesn't mean you always have to agree with it. And I think sharing that you don't always agree with it, but that we have to do it is putting yourself last, right? Like I could be the yes man and I could be, or the yes woman, and always backing every single decision that the company makes. And maybe that would boost my career a little bit faster. Maybe I would be looked at as the person that, you know, always goes above and beyond. But it's also fair to say to my employees, this probably isn't right. This probably isn't fair. But we're going to do it. And we're going to do it with smiles on our faces and really push through and get there because I'm getting buy-in at that point from them. And they're the ones that actually make my paycheck as a manager. You know, their performance, their buy-in to what we're doing. And so I think that humanizing piece, that vulnerable piece is probably the thing that I would hang my hat on for the rest of my life as a manager and as a leader. I think training is always obviously so important in training the right way. I think having peers train, there came a point as my time as a manager where I knew less than my employees. And I think that will happen because I don't have boots on the ground every day. I think the team lead role in a leadership function is the hardest role in the company because you are literally playing the liaison from the actual seller because you're still selling and you're still supporting your sellers, but you're also having to convince your manager why something is not happening. You know, why aren't you making 15 meetings a week? Well, Mr. and Mrs. Manager, I can't because of X, Y, and Z. I don't know that. I don't believe it. And so I think it's always staying close with your team. Having a good culture carrier and leader on your team is also incredibly important. But yeah, those would be the things that I would say is love your team, love your team more than you love yourself, obviously. And I think that is kind of the thing that's probably pushed DoorDash the furthest in any department is we've got great leadership, but we really give our team a voice. And that's the way that we innovate and create new processes here too.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. That was very insightful. I'm sure we could talk for another hour about a host of different topics, but I appreciate you sharing those. I know that you're on LinkedIn. Are you willing to connect with people if they have other questions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime.
All right, very good. And when we're all out in Austin, you'll rest assured that we'll be looking you up for sure.
Yes, please. I would be glad to.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here this morning. John, thanks so much for making the introduction to Amanda in the first place and for running our Austin chapter out there. Amanda, thank you. That was just fantastic. It was a great conversation. So any questions that come up about our group, about this recording, it'll be available down the road as well. We'll make it available to you. If you have any questions about that, let us know. And look forward to seeing you for our next event coming up at the end of the month. Actually, I'm sorry, the middle of the month. I forgot we're already at the end of September here. But the next event actually is going to be, we have two very senior executives who run a large business up in Canada, talking about the cross-border interaction between companies, business, hiring, everything else as well. So it'll be interesting to kind of see the Canadian perspective, and they can tell us about how much they're laughing at our debates. It'll be great. So we'll see you all in a couple weeks, and otherwise have a great rest of your week and a good end to the month. Thanks so much. Take care.